All right, I am going to get started while paying attention to people trying to get admitted. So my name is Jesse Terry, and I'm with Yellowstone-Teton Clean Cities. We are a nonprofit program of the Department of Energy with alternative fuels for transportation. Our particular Clean Cities covers Wyoming, Montana, and Eastern Idaho. There are about 80 clean cities across the country. Some do cities, some do states. We do 2.5 states, so quite a big geographic area. Um, some of the fuels that are used for transportation: EVs, propane, CNG, RNG, hydrogen, a bunch of others. But renewable diesel is the one that we'll talk about here. This is a monthly working group that's been happening almost for 3 years now, I think. We have a lot of attendees from our region. That's what we target, but we also have people from all over the country. We got Tim Leach here from Alaska. We have a bunch of people usually from the East Coast, and they've even started a similar. They were doing a quarterly working group, and that's progressed into a buying group. And so, yeah, a lot has come from this. We've done some specific ski resort renewable diesel working groups. Um, because they are one of the bigger adopters of this, at least in our region. So today, I'll introduce Matt Upmeyer shortly, but again, as I do most of the time, I just do a general introduction. Uh, some people it's your first time, some people have been here quite a few times. So I'll just do a basic introduction about what renewable diesel is, and then we'll hear from Matt from Montana Renewables. Um, and this year, with some funding pullbacks and stuff, and when things are up in the air, I reached out to Montana Renewables and Conrad Bischoff, and they both agreed to support us financially to continue this throughout the year, so we don't have to rely on any federal grants or anything. So I want to thank them for supporting this. So yeah, we have Matt Upmeyer here. He's the director of feedstock sourcing and strategy at Montana Renewables. I'll mention this again later, but I saw him a couple months ago. He was on Montana Ag Live. That's our PBS agriculture show, and it's a pretty cool show. And I was surprised to see them talking about renewable diesel. So you can look that up. I think I share a link. I shared a link in the invite to this, but that's worth watching too to have the agricultural perspective on that. So as I mentioned, we have this grant coming up. Well, actually, I just 5 minutes ago got confirmation that we did get the funding. So we will be doing agriculture, rancher farmer specific outreach for renewable diesel. So part of that is to give two talks at two conventions, one in Montana, one in Wyoming. So I think I'm going to do this Montana Stock Growers Association in December. Then we want to convene with regional fuel producers and providers to help them disseminate information with handouts and demonstrations, whatever that might look like. And then lastly, we want to develop some kind of tool that can be shared throughout the country, but designed for farmers and ranchers to weigh the benefits, pros and cons of a more expensive fuel. It typically is more expensive, but it has a lot of benefits. And so we want to try and develop a way that people can easily compare things and understand what fits into their portfolio for ranching and farming specifically. So here's the quick introduction. What is renewable diesel? So renewable diesel is a drop-in replacement for petroleum diesel. It meets all the same ASTM specs. So it can be used in anything that uses number two or number one diesel. It meets all the ASTM D975 standards. And had talks. If you look on YouTube, you can see we did a whole seminar on just the ASTM specs. So you can look into that more detail if you want. One of the benefits of many for renewable diesel, it has a much higher cetane, so it has improved engine combustion. Not you don't want to combust your engine. Better fuel combustion, more thoroughly combusted, so it's a more thorough burn. That's kind of what cetane can represent, and it's much much higher than petroleum diesel, which usually starts off around 40 or 42 or something. Very stable. It has very high. I'm not reading from this. I'm just going from this chart that I think I'll show in a second. But it has better oxidative stability, so it lasts a little bit longer in your tanks. It's much cleaner. Chemically, there's a lot fewer molecules. There's none of these aromatic hydrocarbons. There's no sulfur. There's no metals. And what's important to us here, one of the things important to us is that it's made in Montana. It's in Montana. We make it. They make it at Montana Renewables, which is Calumet's subsidiary up in Great Falls. They were leading the Americas for sustainable aviation fuel production, which is analogous to renewable diesel, and Matt will mention that in a bit. And they also produce petroleum products there And so we make it here in Montana, but we also have regionally, we have a plant in Dickinson, North Dakota, and there are two in Wyoming. So between these four refineries, as of a couple of years ago, I think we produced about 20% of the country's renewable diesel. So it is local, regional at least, and so we can support our regional producers by using this here. And I used to lead with this, but I think people are starting to understand. But it's not biodiesel. So it's very different from biodiesel, and we can go into that detail too if anybody wants. This was from last month's presentation where I talked about the two new refineries that came online. Um, but I just want to show everybody again that the states in dark green are where we have refineries in the country. And on the right was my AI redesign of the picture I've been showing for 3 years just to give it a new flair so that you can see the refinery in Montana, the two in Wyoming, and the one in Dickinson. So comparing renewable with petroleum, and then we throw biodiesel in here sometimes as well, just to compare and contrast. But as I already mentioned, the cetane number is much, much higher for renewable diesel. Energy density is quite similar, biodiesel a little bit lower. And as I also mentioned, oxidative stability is much higher with renewable diesel. Sulfur content should be close to zero in renewable, and that's something that the government has mandated with the ultra low sulfur diesel many, many years ago. And aromatics are these cyclic hydrocarbons that I'll show in one of the upcoming slides. So renewable diesel doesn't have any of those. It just has a small subset of what you can find in petroleum diesel.
Jesse,
So
just sorry to
here's a
break it in.
picture.
Are you trying to show a slide? Because I'm just seeing you on the screen right now.
Oh, have I been talking with no slides?
There were a few slides to start with. I think I saw the last one was the what is renewable diesel slide.
I
We're
can
saying
see
the
mine.
fuel composition side.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, maybe it's on my problem or my side. Okay.
It's too cold up there, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, so as long as
Thanks.
most people can see it, I have the fuel composition here to try and show it, the makeup of the two fuels. So on the left, you have uh, your renewable diesel, and on the right, you have petroleum diesel. So petroleum diesel is a much more complex mixture. As I mentioned, you have these aromatic hydrocarbons. Those are those five-membered rings. And sometimes there's six-membered rings. And there's sulfurs represented by the yellow atoms. There could be metals, all kinds of different molecules, really sort of a really diverse group and unpure mixture. Renewable diesel, on the other hand, is a very uniform mixture, often between 15 and 18 hydrocarbons, and they're linear hydrocarbons. Not always perfectly linear; they can be branched, but it's a much more it's sort of a subset of the petroleum, but it doesn't have any of the aromatics. It doesn't have any metals. Doesn't have any sulfur, so it's a lot cleaner. The fuel itself. One thing you'll also notice if you have this fuel is uh, petroleum diesel smells like diesel, if you know what that smells like, and renewable doesn't really smell like anything. So that's another handling benefit. Although I did talk to somebody last week who liked the smell of diesel and likes the smell of diesel exhaust. So there are a few of those people too. Uh, as that previous slide suggested, the mixture of renewable is quite clean compared to that of petroleum, and when you burn them, you sort of see the same thing. So this on the right is petroleum diesel, just regular number two, burning in a little dish, and on the left is renewable diesel, burning in that same dish. Same energy content, but there's the difference. And because of that, that's why we have all these emission systems on newer diesels, the diesel particulate filter, and all that, which they work quite well. But in order for them to work, they end up getting clogged, and you have to regenerate, and it's a big problem for fleets. So by just putting a clean fuel, you don't really burden that emission system, and you can have many fewer problems and downtime with these vehicles. Three more slides here just to talk about feedstocks. So in the United States, the majority of the feedstocks for renewable diesel is soybean oil. Another big one is waste oils and greases, small fractions canola and corn oil and some other things. But at least in this country, it's mostly soybean oil. You can produce renewable from a huge array of feedstocks, from garbage to wood and from air, actually, as we mentioned in one of our talks. And I just found this today. You can graph the different composition of the feedstocks in the country, and soybean oil definitely dominates. But when you combine the tallow, which Montana Renewable uses a bunch, I think we'll hear from that, with yellow grease and white grease, that makes up that bigger fraction. But you can see it really fluctuates depending on markets and what refineries are opening up and what they want to prioritize. This is my last slide. This is Montana Renewables shares this often, showing their strategic location here in Great Falls, how they're in proximity to all these different possible sources. And I think they use a mix of them, but Matt will tell us more about that. And then the rail line is also quite important. Or is that the pipeline? I think that's the rail.
That's the rail line, yep.
And there are some other rails that come off of there too. But so yeah, with that, I'll let Matt take over. But again, if you go online, you can see the Montana Ag Live episode 6 from April, and he's got his entomologist on there and a couple other people. It's always a fun watch. So let me see if I can let Matt take over. I guess while I'm doing that, if there are any questions with the introduction, feel free to ask.
It's Stephen Levy at Empire Clean Cities in Sprague. One question about your feedstock chart. Is used
Sure.
cooking oil in the tallow thing?
No, used cooking oil would probably be one of the
Yep.
greases. Well,
Yellow grease. Yeah, yellow grease is where they categorize UCO generally.
Thank you.
Yep.
I guess I got to stop sharing and then I can.
All right, let me see if I can share here. Well, it says disabled.
Been a little while since I. Participants. Matt. Make co-host. Confirm.
There we go. All right, give me just a second here to try to see if my technology will work. And let's see. All right, let me know if you guys can see a PowerPoint presentation.
Yeah, we see it.
All right, let's see if I can make this large for us here. How about now? You guys still got it?
Yep.
Okay. I can't see any of you, so if you may just have to speak up and holler at me if you have questions. I guess try to make this fairly interactive. We don't have a huge group, but I thought I'd maybe start off by telling you guys a little bit about Montana Renewables. This may be repeat information for some of you, but thought we'd start there, and then I'll dive a little bit deeper into the feedstocks, and then we'll save some time at the end if you guys want to talk markets or what we're seeing in the market for feedstocks. Obviously, we had a big RVO announcement that came out earlier in the year, so I've seen a lot of volatility, and then certainly what's going on in the Middle East is driving volatility and feedstock costs, in addition to what we're seeing on the fossil and petroleum side of the business as well. So, as the first slide showed, Montana Renewables, certainly a leader in the energy transition. We own and operate several refineries across the United States, most on the Gulf Coast, and then we do have the one asset in Great Falls, Montana, that's operating about 50% of the capacity on fossil fuels, making traditional products like diesel and jet fuel and gasoline, as well as asphalt. And in 2022, we converted half of that asset into a renewable fuels refinery. We were actually one of the largest refiners of sustainable aviation fuel up until we had a couple competitors that one-upped us, but we've increased our capacity in a turnaround this spring. So we'll talk more about that here in just a few minutes. But Calumet, we've been in the Great Falls community for over 100 years. That refinery's been there for a long, long time, and Great Falls is certainly one of the areas we're proud of and happy to call home for one of our refineries. At the MRL asset, we use a number of different feedstocks. We'll talk through that in more detail here, but we use oil seed crops such as camelina, canola, soybean oil, as well as waste and byproduct oils, tallow, corn oil, distillers corn oil, specifically from the ethanol refining process, use cooking oil. And we make really three main products out of that. We make renewable diesel, sustainable aviation fuel, and renewable naphtha. We also have some renewable off gases, propanes, and different things like that we actually are able to used to convert back into the hydrogen we use to hydrotreat the fats and oils to make the renewable products we make. So our plant is a HEFA process, which is the acronym for hydrotreating esters and fatty acids. You guys probably, if you're looking at the sustainable aviation fuel, news and processes and people are producing it, there's a number of different technologies that you can use to make sustainable aviation fuel. Alcohol to jet. There's biomass to jet, and a lot of these are, I guess, what we would consider sort of second generation technologies. Certainly, the chemistry works and they're viable, but right now they're somewhat cost prohibitive, and that's probably the biggest barrier. And Jesse mentioned that earlier, right? There's typically a premium for these renewable feedstocks. Or, I'm sorry, renewable finished fuels, and the kind of the name of the game is to find a way to manage those costs of your inputs and processing technology to make the fuels. So here we go. Just a little bit of Montana Renewables, sort of by the numbers. We are one of the largest producers of sustainable aviation fuel in North America. SAF is designed to reduce the carbon footprint in the aviation industry. That's a very hard to decarbonize area. I don't see a near-term future where we're going to be, flying airplanes on electricity and things like that, just due to the risk and the nature of that need. So, plus the fleet of aircrafts are significantly, older, well maintained but older. So we're looking at sort of a near-term solution, and then of course, the engineers are working on in the aviation space on a lot of longer-term alternatives. But certainly, HEFA produced SAF and other pathways to produce SAF is certainly the near term. So Montana Renewables site specifically is permitted for 15,000 barrels a day of fuel capacity. Last year in 23 and through 25, we were making about 30 million gallons a year of sustainable aviation fuel. We just went through a turnaround, as I mentioned, that's increased our SAF capacity pretty significantly, and we do have plans to increase that even further going into 2027. So, sorry, I don't know if there's comments coming in here, but again, I can't see that screen, so I guess we can hold those, or Jesse, you can interrupt me if you need to. But
no comments yet.
Okay, good. All right, so let's talk through the growth of Montana Renewables. So in 2021, MRL was incorporated, and really this was kind of an evaluation of that asset in Great Falls and trying to really determine what the best, most sustainable long-term future was for that asset. And it was determined that going into renewable fuels service would serve the asset and the community and the people that we employ much better. So in 2022, they converted that plant over to produce renewable fuels in a portion of that facility. So again, I mentioned we do have the fossil train that still runs, and we've got the renewable train that's been added since then. So in 2023 we expanded. In 24 we added more SAF capacity, and one of the big milestones that I guess we talk a lot about is the DOE issuance of a loan in Q1 of 2025. So we closed a loan with the DOE to help us, sort of clean up our balance sheet of a lot of project financing that we use to get that project up and running. So I do want to clarify, it's a loan, not a grant. So that will be paid back, but certainly helped us sort of position ourselves for the future at the Great Falls refinery. 2026, which we just completed here about a month ago, we completed a big turnaround. We were down for over 40 days, where we actually changed out catalyst, made a few equipment changes in the kit, refining kit, to create more optionality. Gives us the option to produce more sustainable aviation fuel at that site. So prior to the turnaround, like I mentioned, we were making about 30 million gallons a year of SAF. Currently, we have the ability to produce about 120 to 150 million gallons per year of SAF. And so that's a pretty significant increase. One of the things to understand sort of the process flow, right? We were basically taking a renewable diesel molecule and through, a different catalyst and the way we process it, we're able to convert that into the SAF molecule, which is, not too different, right? Other than, the specs and components, but to the extent the SAF market is not there, we still could produce additional renewable diesel instead of making it into SAF. So when I say optionality, it really is, we have the choice to turn up and down the amount of SAF make, and whatever we don't make in SAF, we will leave as renewable diesel. So again, the one thing with SAF, when you have additional isomerization capacity, you produce just a little bit more naphtha. So you can see the naphtha numbers went up as well. So one of the things Jesse had some questions about and thought we would talk a little bit more about is the feedstock positioning and the feedstock sourcing for renewable fuel production. So one of the things that's unique and I think gives us a pretty strategic position is our feedstock flexibility. We have the ability to actually handle many different feedstocks. We've got a pretty robust pretreatment unit that sits in front of our renewable fuels unit, where we can bring in waste-based oils, we can bring in cleaner vegetable oils, and that really gives us the opportunity to touch a little bit of everything. So, not without giving a complete exhaustive list, we've run feedstocks like camelina, we run a lot of tallow, we run a lot of canola oil, distillers corn oil, used cooking oil, we've run choice white grease. So really we do have the ability to run pretty much anything on the list that Jesse shared earlier. Our strategic location, again, we saw the map that was shared a moment ago. We're sitting on the BNSF High Line. So that's a line that really connects, from Chicago all the way to the West Coast. And we sit on one of the main traffic corridors on the BN. So we've got very efficient logistics and freight to get product into the plant, as well as our finished product out of the plant. And then the last thing really is our geographic location, where we sit in terms of production of these feedstocks. So ethanol production in the Western Corn Belt flows extremely well, connected by the BN. Canola to the north, Canada produces, north of 20 million acres of canola. The state of Montana produces about 200 and some thousand acres of canola. So we actually have a really good geographic fit in terms of feedstock flowing in. And then the other thing I would say that we consider a strategic position is our ability to switch that feedstock mix. So many of the coastal players rely on either imports of feedstock or a much longer supply chain to get product there by rail. We have the ability to turn that pretty quickly. So if something falls out of favor in terms of pricing or availability, we're able to flip pretty quickly, both with the feedstock flexibility from our operating units, as well as the logistics and the inbound that make it far more nimble than some of the other coastal assets. So again, to dive into that, I mean, the renewable feedstocks, there's a lot of complexity to that market and complexity to some of the strategic drivers. So if you think of the feedstock as your primary cost, it really is. That's the base feedstock constitutes the large majority of your finished fuel pricing and cost. Operating costs are pale in comparison to the actual feedstock that's coming in. So looking at a dynamic feedstock cost structure, then you couple that with eligibility and competitiveness of the regulatory markets. That's really what shapes our feedstock buy and our feedstock slate. So not all feedstocks are created equal. Some of them carry a lower CI score, carbon intensity score, and that drives many factors. If you're going to a regulated market in California, for example, the California LCFS is priced based on the CI or carbon intensity of your feedstock. 45Z, which is a producer's tax credit under the tax code, is 45Z. Those are also based off emission factors, which are a function of the carbon intensity score of the feedstock. So as we look at how we manage our margin, we manage that total feedstock cost, which is the biggest cost of the finished fuel, we're taking into account all of these things. Where can we get it? Both with supply security, lowest cost, and then meeting that profile for the attributes that our customers require, and then ultimately, trying to make this as margin accretive as possible by creating that value stack of the credit values as well as the lower cost of logistics and inbounds. So that nimbleness is really what sort of drives us to our feedstock purchasing decisions. In terms of the pricing and market trends, so feedstock prices have been extremely volatile. So in 2026, we finally got early 26. We saw some certainty and clarity around the renewable volume obligations. So you guys are all probably familiar with the RVO and probably saw a lot of headlines around the RVO. But the RVO is effectively the obligation of the obligated fossil refiners to blend renewable fuels into the finished road fuel stream. And the sort of currency of compliance are RINs, renewable identification numbers. So you can imagine when they put a pretty robust and aggressive target on renewable volume obligations for the 26 and 27 compliance years, the feedstock supply market certainly felt a sense of tightness, and we saw those markets all appreciate accordingly, right? So the supply and demand constraint is not, I don't think, prohibiting. I think we'll still be able to run and meet the targets, but it is going to require an awful lot of capacity utilization in the United States, as well as likely some imports. So we've shifted from kind of a domestic focused market when we were underutilizing industry capacity to now we are looking at sort of a global market here as we need to run the industry at 90+% utilization and probably turn back on some of those biodiesel assets that were previously idled under a lower compliance target. So our procurement strategy really is very dynamic, and it is looking at where do our competitors in the Gulf Coast, for example, how are they pricing in imported feedstocks that may not apply for all the credits. For example, the producer's tax credit is restricted to USMCA feedstocks, but we do need to look at all these compliance markets and import markets to see sort of how our pricing strategy fits in. So the other thing that we focus on is logistics and delivery costs to get these feedstocks into our facility. So certain geographies that don't spread well to the Gulf may spread well to Montana renewables. So that certainly becomes our key target areas. And I guess I kind of hit on the fourth point here, the fifth point. We really have seen this shift from a North American centric market to a much more global market. As we saw, soybean oil prices jump dramatically. Bean oil futures, if you look at the Chicago Board of Trade, we're trading around the 40 to 45 cent range. Late in 25, once we saw the rally driven mostly by RVOs and the higher compliance hurdle, we saw bean oil futures rally up to the upper 70s. So a pretty significant shift in cost there. The other thing too we've touched on a couple times here is compliance credit impacts. So if you look at RIN pricing, again, look back to 2025, RINs were trading around $1 per RIN. Renewable diesel generates 1.7 RINs per gallon. So, and the baseline RIN, which is a D6 RIN, is 1 for 1 RIN per gallon. That's for ethanol compliance. But RINs have really appreciated as we try to solve for that tight balance sheet on the RVO and the RIN balance sheet. So LCFS credits, low carbon fuel standard credits. This is primarily a California project, but California LCFS credit values have also rallied as they're trying to meet their compliance targets. And the key thing to remember is there's a really strong interplay between all of these credit markets combined with the finished fuel consumers' demands, right? A lot of the finished fuel consumers want to have a lower CI score fuel that they're purchasing, especially specifically in SAF. They have very, very tight requirements in terms of the CI reduction and then certain feedstocks that play well into SAF. So we're trying to look at this interplay between the feedstock costs, the compliance credit markets, which is part of that value stack, the finished fuel market that you're selling into, whether it's a compliance market like California, whether it's a mandated market like soon will be coming on in BC or specifically the European SAF markets, and then really that intercommodity play between feedstocks like distillers corn oil and how it spreads to soybean oil or tallow. So all of that you lump together every day. We're trying to balance those things and take advantage of our feedstock flexibility to adapt to those markets and the changing policy and regimes and credit pricing mechanisms. So that's the key driver here is the feedstock pricing into the feedstock pricing. So how do we select the right feedstock? How do we optimize that framework? Well, again, it does really start with carbon intensity, and you can make renewable diesel or SAF out of any of the feedstocks that we mentioned before, right? It could be seed-based crops, it could be waste-based feedstocks, it could be used cooking oil, and there's a number of others out there. But it really comes down to what does the consumer want, and how can you get that value stack to maximize margin. So carbon intensity and compliance, the lower the carbon intensity, generally speaking, the higher price the feedstock, because it'll get you a larger 45Z credit. That's not universally true, but that's generally true. Certification and sustainability. If you're selling to an airline, they're going to want CORSIA certified feedstocks, and that CORSIA certification does not apply to all feedstocks. So it's, again, certainly it's an important factor as we look at sustainable aviation fuel. Operational factors, do we need to pre-treat the feedstock? Are there high impurity levels like metals that could harm or foul the catalyst? And then what is the feasibility of converting that feedstock into the finished fuel? Then, of course, the logistics and supply reliability. Is it something I can get 2 rail cars of today and never see that feedstock again, or is it something that I can enter into a longer term supply agreement and have that as a viable feedstock on the go forward? So a number of things that go into that optimization, and that's really what we try to balance each day.
And Matt, we have a question about RINs here.
Sure.
So Jackson Hole Airport in Wyoming currently purchases renewable diesel without RINs. He asks, would you recommend working with Montana Renewables directly or coordinating with our fuel distributor to acquire the RINs? Also, out of curiosity, is it possible to purchase RINs retroactively?
So the answer is yes, and we do sell RINs, but as an airport, I'm not sure that you have an obligation. I don't want to speak for you on your compliance standpoint, but I'm not sure, unless you just wanted exposure to that credit market, I'm not sure why you'd want to own RINs. Typically, the people that are purchasing and retiring those RINs are obligated parties like fuel refiners. So, and the reason that you guys are buying the fuel without RINs is because someone like Montana Renewables or another fuel producer, whether it's RD or SAF, all of the finished fuel is priced at X, and then you sort of discount it by all these credits that we can gain from that. So again, if you're able to sell it into a jurisdiction that has an LCFS credit market and you can monetize that reduces the fuel cost. If you can sell the RIN off and monetize that reduces the fuel cost. So what typically a producer of renewable fuels will do is we've got sort of an all-in where if you want all the credit attributes, the fuel price is going to be higher, and then you could go sell all those attributes. Or more typically, what you would see is when you purchase that fuel, it's going to be without the RINs, without any of the compliance attributes. Those will all be monetized separately, and that reduces the fuel costs and tries to narrow that spread between fossil fuel and renewable fuel. So I don't know if that answered the question or not. If happy to dive deeper if you'd like.
I think that makes sense. In other words, if you want a RIN, sure, you can have it, but the fuel costs a lot more.
Exactly. So whatever the value of the RIN today, it's $2.40 per RIN. So take that times 1.7, it would add $3.5, $4 a gallon onto your fuel price. Now you'd have a RIN that you could go monetize, right? So the net price may not be any different, but now you'd be trading the RIN as well as purchasing the fuel.
So the RINs right now you say are over $2 per RIN.
Yeah.
There's 1.7 RIN per gallon, so that's like you said, almost a $3 premium.
North of three, between $3.5 and $4. Yeah. So it's significant. So again, what we do is we are looking at A, how do we buy the cheapest feedstock? B, how do we maximize the values of these credits, right? That we're selling into. So finding an obligated party that needs these credit values. And the goal ultimately is, we need to have, if we want to move our fuel, we need to try to supply that to, customers at a narrow enough spread between fossil alternative and the renewable fuel to get them to buy it, right? So that's kind of where that's what we're trying to do is again, give everybody as cheap of an alternative as they can, even if it is at a premium, right? As cheap of an alternative as they can to get into the market. So. And all of those credits stack up and create value of the finished fuel. All right. So hopefully that answered. If not, we can certainly dive deeper into that at the end. But yeah. So again, I guess I've kind of, sorry, I feel like I'm being a little bit redundant here when I threw these slides together. But the trade flows really, sort of to wrap this all up. I mean, we've gone from what felt like a very U.S. centric market or North America centric market a year ago to some new rules and a larger RVO that makes us a far more global feedstock dynamic. So you're seeing things like Chinese used cooking oil or Asian used cooking oil that's actually pricing in advantageous to U.S. feedstocks, even net of the 45Z tax credit. So the 45Z tax credit does not apply to foreign feedstocks outside of the USMCA feedstocks. But even when you exclude that, some foreign sources of feedstock are still pricing into the U.S. So the coastal players should be the ones that first take advantage of it. Montana Renewables being an inland producer, and even some of our competitors you mentioned, the Dickinson plant or the Holly Frontier plants. All of us being interior players. Typically, that is not going to flow to us as readily, but certainly stuff we're watching. Strategic sourcing of feedstock. We're looking at all of these changing global programs. We're looking at the geopolitics of the tariffs that have come and gone and maybe coming back again, right? The policy exclusions, end user demands for certain fuels. So all of these sourcing strategies become challenges, and we definitely have to be mindful of all of those. Creating the operational flexibility that I mentioned with our robust pretreatment is something that really gives us an advantage and allows us to be somewhat feedstock agnostic as long as we're meeting the demands of our customers and compliance with the rules and regulations of the jurisdictions we're selling into. We really do have the flexibility to run about anything. And then I guess what we're really trying to take an approach of is action local, but really trying to think globally, right? About what does this look like, and where do we see the flows of the finished fuels, to fill a European mandate, to fill a Canadian credit market, the US LCFS markets, all those things that really drive again feedstock sourcing and strategies. So one of the things I guess I didn't put a slide in here, and I'll jump ahead. You guys can be thinking of questions, and then I'll drop the slideshow here in a second. But we talked a lot about SAF, or I talked a lot about SAF, but one of the things it's important, we do produce renewable diesel ratably every day. And so I know that a lot of folks on this call are using renewable diesel. Jesse, you've mentioned that there's a number of people in the region that are actively using it. It's possible some of that renewable diesel came from us. Our barrels do get traded out into the market, and who knows, they could be finding their way, right back to some of these folks. But certainly want to support the local, demand for renewable fuels, and to the extent that there's an opportunity that people are exploring and want more information, we'd love to sit down, get our team on the phone and see how we can support the growth there.
Yeah,
so with that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing.
Yeah, I'll jump in right away about that. Supplying fuels locally, I know one of the problems was the racking at the plant can only take rail unless it's a petroleum product. There's some way. So what's the most recent development there? What can we get by truckload from Great Falls?
Yeah. So you are correct, right? We load out truck fossil diesel at our rack and truck gasoline at our rack. We do not load out renewables, but listen, there's to the extent people want to blend or use renewable diesel, transloading from rail to truck is not an insurmountable task. We do that in other areas, and certainly there are opportunities to sort of break bulk, if you will, of those renewable products. So if it's something with a reasonable amount of volume and we can either help or support working with a transload partner to take it from rail to truck, but we do not do it on site. You are correct.
I thought there was an option where some renewable could be blended into petroleum product, then put onto a truck. Is that doable? Somebody want R50?
So that's a good question. I think that great question. I don't know, Jesse, to the extent of what the blends are and our blending capability in terms of the certain blend ratios. We do load SAF on trucks, so blended SAF. We blend Jet A and our SPK, and that can be loaded out by truck. We do supply a lot of the local airports with that blended SAF today.
Can you tell me which airports are supplied with some of your SAF?
Yeah, I can't get into it an exhaustive list, but certainly if you're flying out of Great Falls, you could assume that some of that fuel in the Great Falls Airport is blended SAF. Yep.
And does any go to the Maelstrom Air Force Base?
We do have contracts with DLA, so yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize any was in Great Falls. That's good to know.
Yeah. Yep.
Are there any other questions? I have 10 that I could spit out pretty quick, but I'll open it to everyone else.
More so just a comment from me.
Where do we buy
Um,
those what are they like called? Where do you buy the RINs from, or is that something that government issues you?
Yeah, so great question, and that this could take about a 3-hour class on RINs alone. But let's start with the high level, right? So when you produce a gallon of renewable fuel, whether it's ethanol at an ethanol plant or if it's biodiesel at a biodiesel plant, renewable diesel, jet fuel, you actually generate the RIN when you produce the fuel. So the RIN is generated, and then that RIN either tags along with the fuel or it can be blended and separated. And if you separate the RIN, then the RIN becomes kind of like a piece of paper that you can register through what's called the EMTS system, and you can sell those RINs, trade those RINs, or retire those RINs. And so the RINs generated with the fuel, that's what sort of again proves compliance. And then typically there's a trader market for it, and there's also the obligated party that are truly purchasing those that will be retired for their obligation to meet the RVO.
Yeah.
All right, will David jump in?
Yeah, Matt, appreciate this. I'm new to participating, so I apologize for any ignorance I share.
No.
I'm in the forestry and wood products world, and know that you can use biomass to make SAF and renewable diesel. I suspect that it's a different process than what you guys are doing with your seed oils. I guess my question is how different is that, and what would it take for you guys to be able to add that to your portfolio of feedstocks?
Great question. I know there's a lot of research being done. I actually met with the folks at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory, which is a DOE funded lab, and they're working on some processes to use biomass to convert, I guess, an intermediate oil that could potentially run through a HEFA process, right? So, and honestly, I don't know where that technology stands. Certainly we could not take a woody biomass and convert it through our existing process. There would have to be an intermediate step, right? So, I mentioned to you that all these technologies are sound, right? I mean, on paper and even on pilot scale, a lot of these are certainly practical. But right now, the most economical, and that's why you'll see like Phillips and Valero and ourselves focused on SAF through the HEFA process. It currently is the most economical way to get there, right? So, and we think that's probably in the near term going to be the case, but yeah, again, technology exists. So I think that in the long haul, that all those technologies will probably be required to meet the goals of the aviation industry long term.
Thanks.
You bet.
And I'll mention we did a working group on that. I think it's on YouTube, where we went through the 5 different main processes of doing it. Like you can actually make RD from air. You pull the carbon dioxide out of the air and stuff. It just takes a lot of electricity, and it's not financially viable, or it doesn't energetically make sense. But we did go into some detail. I've got a question in the chat here. How much of the SAF is typically blended at the airport versus blended off-site and shipped and trucked to the airport?
Yep, great question. So that last mile logistics is something that's pretty important, right? And one that we've spent a lot of time on. So we blend it at our site if it's going to go out as blended SAF. So we blend it with our Jet A right there on our refinery sites. We make Jet A on the fossil side. We make the SPK on the renewable side. We blend that to the blended SAF spec, and it ships out on rail car. So that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it would be to blend it at a third-party terminal, right, where you bring in Jet A and you bring in SPK and you blend it and then ship the blended SAF. Getting it on the pipeline, if you're at a major airport and your pipeline served, that's where you have another layer of complexity, right? So people that are receiving truck or receiving rail, blended SPK, again, that's stuff we could do to serve our area, our immediate area. That's stuff we could do almost immediately, literally, and there's ways we can separate off the scope emission credits, things like that, and separate those to monetize those to, again, keep the cost, competitive with other renewable fuel alternatives, other SAF alternatives. So if you're in the region and you say, hey, I'd love to take a truckload of blended SAF, we can supply it, right? And that's something that we could do in the short term. But that is sort of the industry challenge: is how do you get SPK, whether it's from our refinery or others, to the airplane wing, right? There's usually a refinery or a tank farm or some delivery solution that you need to engineer to make sure that you can get there efficiently, safely, all the above. So that's something we're working on closely.
To be clear, this is as I understand it, you as an airport can't blend it. There's ASTM specs on how you blend that fuel, right? You need to be permitted to blend the fuel. Yeah.
Yeah, so typically it's at a third party, or if you receive your jet by rail, for example, and you've got a certified rail barrel coming in, then it's already blended. You can take it into your inventory from there. So yeah.
We've got a question from Neil Allman.
Hey guys, thanks for the great information and more updates on what's happening up north in Great Falls. I'm Neil Allman with the Energy Office at the Montana Department of Environmental Quality. And I'm curious to Jesse's earlier question and to what was just said about where things are blended. How do you get the SAF across town from Montana Renewables to the Great Falls Airport if you're not trucking it right now? Do you train it a little bit somewhere?
No, we truck it. We truck it out of Great Falls, yeah.
Well,
on the blended SAF.
So do you guys then have a rack to fill up a truck and drive it across town, as Great Falls does, the airport?
Correct. Yeah.
No, but that can't be done for RD right now.
Yeah, I need to dig into that and see if what they've got for blending capabilities on the RD, and if we can load out. Right now, all of our RD goes out on supply agreements on rail. So I don't know how much of a hurdle it would be to be able to load out RD on trucks. So apologize. That's something I should have a better handle on. I don't though. So we can certainly dig into that though.
No, it's okay, Matt. This is something that we brought up with Krista Lee when she's presented previously, when she was still with Montana Renewables. And it's just an ongoing question of how do we use more mid-Montana fuel, especially with this great resource in central Montana in Great Falls. And, obviously, with the RINs helping bring down costs for other markets and not having that here in Montana, we're a little bit of a disadvantage, and you're probably shipping the vast majority of it out of state. But it would be great to find a way to not only financially, but also physically be able to start using some of our own products. But thanks for the information, Matt.
No, absolutely. And just to be clear, the RINs are not state specific, right? So the RINs, you still would have the benefit of the RINs in Montana. What you don't have is compliance markets like the California LCFS credit, right? So there are some credit stacks that are state specific, but the RINs are certainly, which is a big piece of the revenue, or the value stack of the renewable diesel. So,
right.
Neil, I can, yeah, you bet.
What is the premium for SAF versus Jet A right now?
So, again, I'll just speak from our public comments, right? We're getting between $1 and $2 a gallon of premium for SAF over Jet A.
And you did mention that the feedstock is the number one cost for these products. So a slightly cheaper feedstock can significantly impact the price of the product, right?
Yep, and let me clarify my statement. I said $1 to $2, $1 to $2 premium for SAF. So that's over again. Remember, I talked about the flexibility between RD and SAF. So we get a $1 to $2 premium. There's obviously more cost to produce the SAF versus RD. So yeah, I guess your question was, can we, if we had a lower feedstock cost, does that reduce the fuel price? Sure, right? but the feedstock sellers are pretty darn astute, right? So we're sort of seeing the CI parity model that's created, right? So if you're a bean oil seller and you're a used cooking oil seller, and you know the difference in your value creation is 5 to 6 cents a pound in the feedstock value because you get more 45Z credit, a bigger LCFS credit. Everybody's pricing their stuff at near parity, right? So you'll see one will get out of whack for a little bit. Tallow will get too expensive, so the industry stops buying tallow. Then tallow prices will come down, and then bean oil will get a little too expensive, and then bean oil prices will come down. So I think again, it's mathematical calculations with a lot of public information. So the traders are pretty astute, and again, we see that the market's sort of pricing towards CI parity. That's not shocking, right? That it would do that, right? I mean, if you look at it and say, okay, I've got a cheaper feedstock, the sellers are going to try to keep part of that rent as well. So of course we're moving around in and out of feedstocks to try to maximize our buying opportunity, right? To buy the cheapest feedstock and meet the operational constraints and regulatory constraints, things like that. But they're tending to price towards CI parity.
We got a question from Daniel Sigler. He's with Conrad Bischoff.
Hey, so as far just for clarification, we do haul a ton of jet fuel out of Calumet and Montana Renewables, and so if anybody does need any SAF, we're happy to haul it. As far as the renewable side, like everybody's been saying, they can't load it off the truck rack right now. I'm going on 7 months of trying to get my first rail car from Montana Renewables. It's been the longest process I've ever been involved with, but we do have a ton of rail cars coming in this week of renewable and into Idaho Falls and Nampa. So if anybody needs any, we have it. And then Matt, I mean, I would love to get some of the Montana product is far, in my opinion, far superior, and I'd love to have it. So as soon as we can get it, I'd like to start getting it in.
Oh, the RD you're saying?
Yeah. Your cold flow, at least the stuff I checked on this winter, your cold flow was the best of all of them that I checked into. So
yeah, that's what we've shown a bunch. The data we've seen, it is the best winter product. Neste is maybe the next closest, but yeah, so it would be awesome to get that in, especially in the winter.
Excellent. So Daniel, let's connect after this, and we'll see what we can do to help you out.
Okay.
So
yeah, no, that sounds good. I appreciate that.
All right. Are there any other questions? I have 10. I have 10 more questions. Matt, do you guys send any fuel up to Alaska, or do you not see if it does go up there? It goes through.
I don't. Yeah, it would go to one of our offtake partners. I don't know. I don't think it does. So Alaska, I believe, is excluded from the volume obligation and the blending. So I don't know that there's the incentives to take it to Alaska, unless again there was some massive cold flow reason, right? Where they would, if there's a premium to have the correct cold flow properties. But don't believe we do. But I couldn't swear to that. Certainly,
Jesse,
our product does go to Canada.
Mind if I hop in on that one since we're talking Alaska?
That was for you.
Thank you, Jesse. Yeah. Hey, everybody. Tim Leach. I'm the director for the Alaska Clean Cities and Communities Coalition up here in the state. And there's a big project that our Alaska DOT, Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities, is doing on feedstock study for SAF and RD production. There's a peer review paper out. I'll pull that into the chat in a second, or circulate it through Jesse in a little bit. I don't think, to your question though, Jesse, I don't think there's any SAF up here at this point from any provider. And I'm pretty sure that's the case for renewable diesel as well. I've talked with a couple of the fuel distributors who fielded questions about interest in renewable diesel for stationary power and for some mobility fueling. But I think the price premium has put people off at this point. So where we can drive that cost down, the market's still interested in that. But there is some interest in purchase of alternative fuels up here, and potentially some interest in local production, regional production up in Alaska.
Excellent.
All right. Any last questions here before we wrap it up?
No.
Yes, just one. What are your capabilities for making your cold flow properties?
So you're talking to the feedstock guy, not the technical guy, but I'll take a little bit of a stab at it. I mean, listen, it's we do have the ability to sort of change those cut points in the refinery. It does come down to economics, right? So if we're taking molecules, some of those lighter molecules that create better cold flow properties, you're taking away from that SAF stream, right? So I think that it becomes an economic question. So I believe that's the. Sorry, go
for
ahead.
the RD that you normally produce on a day-to-day schedule, is it like a norm that you try to meet?
For sure there is, right? Obviously there's a spec, right? So staying on spec and that would be the number one priority, right? And then sort of optimizing the efficiency, so we less loss and less naphtha production, things like that. But you've probably stretched me to the end of my technical knowledge on that one. But Stephen, I could certainly get you with our engineering team if you were had some interest in sort of what is possible.
I'll try and share the presentation. I think I have one of their specs, and I've just screenshotted what was shared to me. But it's approaching zero, I think. Maybe it's a bit better. Maybe it's like -5 or something. One I did see for renewable diesel. So pretty low.
Yeah, stuff I'd seen samples of was -5 to -10 from Montana Renewables. Sinclair's typically been making their winter renewable in the 0 degree Fahrenheit range. And then that's all compared to the stuff that's going to SoCal that's, plus 20, 25 degrees.
Yeah, we've seen some of that here.
Mm-hmm.
It hangs around in through the fall. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining. I'll try to think of something creative for next month. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or other suggestions. And sounds like we're slowly making progress. And one thing I learned was that we are using renewable in Great Falls at the airport. So that's pretty cool. And I think the airport should be telling people that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well,
right.
Thank you guys for your time. We appreciate it. So
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you very much.
Thank
take
you.
care. Thanks.